Welcome to another edition of Engagement Now. I'm Lorraine Johnson. There's a growing awareness of a father's importance in the life of his children. Both the academic world and the general population are recognizing that a dad's influence goes beyond the children years, well into adulthood, and is an important component to the mother's vital role. It is definitely clear that while moms do their best at raising their boys, they cannot teach them to be a man. As American households and families are increasingly more non-traditional, this episode will focus on the important role dads play in raising their children. Even beyond the child support dilemma and baby mama drama, join us for this discussion. Continue the conversation on Facebook and Twitter at EngageMeDCSD. And for more information on this and a variety of other important topics, visit us online at www.DeKalb.K12.ga.us.
Together we can climb the mountains. Together we can swim an ocean. I always knew we could be the ones. Together we can fly high. Together we can reach the sky. One family against the world. First one girl against the world.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Engagement Now. Before we begin our discussion today, I'd like to take the opportunity to begin by introducing our guest. To my right, I have several fathers who are parents within the DeKalb County school system. We have first Mr. Randy Britt joining us today. We have Andre Merrill, and we also have Tijon DeCosta. And of course, to my left, we have our wonderful co-host, Mr. Knox Phillips. And Knox is actually the Director for Research and Grants for DeKalb County Schools. So I'll turn it over to you from here.
Thank you, Lorraine. It's always a pleasure being among beauty here on the panel.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I have here our expert panel today, Mr. Greg Gray, author and entrepreneur. Welcome to our show. We have Dr. Ralph Simpson, Region 5 Superintendent here in DeKalb Schools, and also one of the key leaders in the My Brother's Keeper initiative within the school district. And last but not least, we have Dr. Tori J. Evans Barton, who is founder and CEO of the Fatherless Generation Foundation. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
So this is one of the first segments on Engagement Now that we've done that specifically focuses on fathers, right, and dads, and we really want to kind of delve into the importance of the father, as it relates to raising children, or the importance of the father figure in the family structure. So Dr. Evans Barton, could you kind of lead off a little bit and help our fathers and our viewers better understand the importance and the role that fathers play in the family structure?
Wow, I'm honored that I get to lead off. Well, so often we have mothers and fathers competing. Who's better, who's, more important, and they're both equally as important. We forget that both are vitally important to the development of a child. And even when it comes to fathers, so often they're disengaged or they're not there. That's the conversation we have. But we forget that they want to be. Sometimes they don't know the avenues by which to go by if they've lost contact or they haven't been reconciled in some ways. But fathers are vitally important to the development of every child out here.
Absolutely, and I think Dr. Evans Barton, it's important to also point out that in many cases, fathers may be the only parent within the home. Yes. We live in a society, there is no traditional family. We are often blended and non-traditional. And I was taught from Alabama, if it functions, it's functional. Right. You make it work and you find a way. And with that said, I'd like to bring into this conversation Mr. Merrill, because Mr. Merrill is a single parent father of 2 daughters. Please share with us how you cope and how you prepare your children for success as a single parent father of 2 daughters.
So as a single parent, first I'd like to piggyback off what she said as far as being a father and how important it is. And we basically, as men, we're taught to provide first. We're taught to provide and be strong men around the house, but being a single dad and trying to gear my daughters for success, I learned to engage, I learned to listen, have ongoing dialogue, not only about school and household chores and things like that, but the entire and the complete life experience. So how I teach them is, how I watch women throughout the day, women at work, women at school, and teachers. And my biggest role models were my mother and my grandmother. So I kind of remember lessons that they taught me, how they, did things around their house, how they respected my father and my grandfather. So it's just remembering those lessons and really trying to replay it back and not look at it as a gender role, but as just a parent.
I know we have Mr. Gray here today, who has done incredible work with kind of researching the role of the father in the family structure. Could you speak to us and speak to our viewers perhaps about some of the work you've done and why it's relevant and important for the conversation we're having today?
Well, certainly. Thank you for having me. The perspective that I'm interested in bringing to the conversation and making sure we continue to bring to the conversation is really twofold. And I think Mr. Merrill just mentioned it, in that we are parents first, and the second part is just about which gender we are. A lot of the work that I've gotten a chance to do and as of late really comes from my personal experience. I'm a father in a blended family. My youngest daughter and her mom divorced when she was 6. So a lot of what I like to talk to men about and families about is what it means to be a dad from a distance. Just because you are in a fatherless home doesn't mean that you have to have a fatherless life. And I think in the school system, a lot of what that connects with is making sure that whether the child lives with you or not, you should still be going to parent-teacher conferences. You should still take your kids to their doctor's appointments and all those other things you would do under any other circumstances. So it's about being a man in your child's life.
And speaking of the child and the perspective of the child, Dr. Simpson, I know you work as a regional superintendent with schools and children each and every day, and you have firsthand knowledge and firsthand perspective of some of the barriers, the issues therein. Could you speak to us a little bit about kind of your experiences working with single fathers, for example, in this situation, and or working with dads in general, and also some of the aspects as it relates to the child and how they internalize all of that?
Yeah, one, I think is just important that as a father and a man is to be an example of what fatherhood is and what it should be. Oftentimes the black male or the father, the absence of the black father is what we typically hear and is played out in the media. But that's in turn inspired and encouraged me to be a certain type of father. Try to not be the stereotype, but be the prototype. And to influence and encourage fathers to internalize that this is not a celebration when you're doing what you're supposed to do as a father. This is, there's no reward for being a father. The reward is that you are upholding your responsibilities and providing support for your children. And that is not a reward. You don't get a medal for that. That is what you're supposed to do. That's an expectation. So, I try to remind fathers, those that I know personally, those that I know professionally, those that I have an opportunity to engage and or encounter in the school, that the things that you do for your children, that you provide for them, being involved in their education, that's not something beyond what you're supposed to do. And I try to stress that point, because being there, a child wants to see a parent when they look out in the audience when they are performing. They're looking for mom and or dad. But to see dad there, yeah, that means a lot. But to see both parents there is just as important. But they want to see you there, and you don't get a medal for that. There's no data boy or a pat on the back. That's what you're supposed to do. And so I just try to encourage and influence the mindset that do what you're supposed to do as a father. Be the prototype and not the stereotype.
Right. Well, one part of the discussion that I'd like to have is whether or not, from an empirical standpoint, there is any research, because I think it goes to say that we all understand the importance of having the presence of both parents within the home. But when there is an absence, has there been any research that we can reference that talks about the effect it may have on a girl or boy, or is the effect the same for both genders when there is the absence of a male figure?
There's tons of research on what's happening to the Fatherless Generation Foundation. I mean, everything from incarceration, 20 times more likely to be incarcerated, 5 times more likely to drop out of high school. I mean, just the list it goes on and on and on. And we forget that when dads are involved, those things do go away. We want to add all of these other things there to say, well, what if the dad is this? But I'm a young woman who grew up fatherless and decided at 31 I was going to find my father. And I found my father and had 2.5 years with him. And in the midst of having that relationship with my dad, he helped me, even as a 31-year-old woman, reach my highest potential. I would have never started the Fatherless Generation Foundation if my dad hadn't had that conversation with me that dads have with their daughters. My dad still had that with me as a 31-year-old woman. And it was actually the Monday before he passed on, had the conversation with me on Monday. By Wednesday, he was in a coma. Sunday, he died. And so sometimes that may be the last conversation we get to go to the next level. I didn't drop out of high school, but I also had the emotional issues that we don't discuss that children are living with. Young girls, teenage pregnancy, you're 192% more likely to have a child as a teenager when you're fatherless. How is that number even possible? Boys are looking for their identity, searching, and girls are as well, but it's that unlovable thing, not feeling worthy, not sure. One of the things that I looked up this morning for this conversation, it said that young women who grow up fatherless actually question whether or not they're worthy. And even if they find a man, will he stay? They're constantly in this intense argument within their own mind on whether or not he's going to leave them. And that's what we're battling with. There's this internal battle. We talk about the outside things, the school, the imprisonment, but let's deal with the internal things, the pain that the children are dealing with.
Wow, that's startling, and it's very powerful. Because what you find, what you're literally saying is that these young girls are seeking validation of self. And I sit here and I was a village kid in LA, Lower Alabama. I was reared by my mother in a single parent home, but there was such strong sense of community, and my grandfather was there. So I never made the connection between there being a lack of a father because there was such a strong, bold presence of a male in my life. So when I sit here, I can't imagine not having that because that was the father figure in my life. So in terms of you also, Tijan, you are a single parent, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you deal with finding, or shall I say, are there women involved in your life, and what are the gender of your children or child?
I have a son. He's 3 years old.
Okay.
And one thing I tell my son is to lead by example and always accept responsibilities for your actions. So when he's around a lot of people and women or men and he does things wrong and they tell him to stop or whatever, sometimes, he will pout, but one thing I will always tell him, man up, accept that responsibility, let's move on from that area. So another thing I do, I would sit down and I would tell him, I say, listen, the me I see is the me I'll be. And I teach that to him. I don't go around my son with my pants sagging down or speaking in vulgar languages or anything like that because I don't want him growing up like that. So the people that he's around is the people that I want to be around.
I think that's important. We're all products of our environment. And unfortunately, not all of our environments mirror, or shall I say, are ideal. And how do we go about giving children that may lack that support structure, assistance to help them be the best me?
In 91, when I came to the school system, I came to education, there were less than 1.5% of African American males in the classrooms throughout the country. I started out teaching at E.L. Miller, 1,200 students. I was the only male teacher there. And I took for granted and assumed the importance of the presence of the male teacher, particularly the black male teacher, until kindergarten and first grade teachers would tell me stop walking by their classrooms, because every time I walked by the classrooms, it was a disturbance. And I couldn't internalize as to why, but they were not and did not see a man or a male at home. And so when you look at it from a perspective when that the presence that we speak of that may not be in the household, let's transition to the school, where a child may matriculate from grades kindergarten through 5th grade without a male teacher, without a male principal. Get to middle school without a male teacher, without a male principal. Matriculate to high school, maybe 1 or 2 male teachers, the PE teacher, the coach, and the possibility of there being a male principal. So this lack of presence of the male, not only from the household, is also prevalent in education and in the schools as well. So as a responsible educator who's intrinsically motivated to be that father figure and that example of what a man is supposed to look like, what a man is supposed to dress like. And I tell male teachers that work in my schools, you are the example and representation of what manhood is for the girls in your school that may never ever see, encounter, and engage with a man. So you've got to get it right. Because that perspective in which they generate, that opinion in which they generate from that experience is going to speak volumes. And don't take for granted when they call you daddy. They call you daddy because there is no daddy. And that's the closest thing to daddy that they will actually see.
Wow. And sitting here, I have 3 degrees and attended law school, and I can remember when I met or had my first black professor. And it was at Auburn University and this was on my 3rd degree. And I was so excited and so proud. And that's not to take anything away from any other professor or instructor that I had had. But the truth of the matter is, in terms of education, whether you're relating by gender or race, there's a correlation there. And there's a sense of connectivity. And that is very important. And one thing that I wonder is, what are we doing to help children, or what programs? Because I know I've heard, of course, Dr. Simpson, that you're involved with My Brother's Keeper, but how can children within the school system get involved, or is there a referral system, and how can mentoring take place?
Yeah, well, I'd like to take that one. On 2 levels, and I have 3 daughters, and they all went to DeKalb County schools. And everybody that's at this table that has kids in DeKalb County schools, if they're engaged, one of the things that you do, one of the things we do, sometimes we're not even aware of it, is that we're not just role modeling for our children, we're role modeling for our children's friends as well. That's true. When our kids were involved in sports, their friends always wanted to ride with us because, we want to ride with Greg's dad, because they got a chance to actually extend that feeling of fatherhood even when we weren't their dads, but they kind of adopted us in that respect. So I think there's a power in that sometimes we lose or are not aware of just because of our presence. So us showing up is a very big deal. But there are a number of mentoring programs. Dr. Simpson's going to love this part, but I actually am privileged to be the president of the DeKalb chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And we actually have a program in this county, and there's a number of, all of the Divine 9 organizations do a lot of work in the community. We have a DeKalb Alpha's Mentoring Initiative, which specifically targets young men ages 4th through 12th grades. And we work with them on lots of things that have to do with school, literacy, and math, but we also work with them on, because most of the kids in the program don't have dads in their home. So I think part of what we as dads should always be doing is finding out another way to be able for us to plug into the community. One quick thing, we adopted Canby Lane Elementary School. That's one of the things our chapter did. And so we go and we do, Real Men Read programs and all those kind of things. And one of the more interesting things we heard was a young lady, when we all showed up, suited and booted, as we say. And one young lady said to her teacher, "I never seen that many black men with suits and ties that were not the police." She had no image of a black man that would be around them during the day in school looking professional that was not police. So our presence, whether you're doing it as part of a fraternity or you're doing it as part of a social organization, I think we need to make sure as men that we are, even if it's not our kids, that we are showing up, because it does make a big difference.
It does.
It does. And I never forget, growing up, my own father, who passed away when I was a senior in high school, what I got from him, and kind of to your point, Doctor, was that in the brief time that we were together on earth, I got so much out of that relationship. One of the things he taught me is what many kids who come from very affluent environments get. They get the perspective from their father that I'm not preparing you for a world that you have to strive to fit in. I'm preparing you for a world that's already in your hands, and you have the power to do something with it. And to be a teenager and have that perspective from your father gives you so much confidence you wouldn't believe it, And I think part of my success in life has nothing to do with how many degrees I have or what experience I've had. More than anything, it's my confidence, my ability to know that as a young man, as a young black man, that I'm empowered and I have the ability to do anything I put my mind to, and I honestly believe that. And so thinking about what we personify in terms of a father, right, or a father figure, I'm really curious thinking about all of this. Mr. Britt, how do you view some of this? Your role as a father, and what type of messaging, that implicit, that hidden messaging did you instill in your parenting to help your children realize that it truly can be whatever they want to be?
Oh yes, what I do is I always talk to my kids every day on a daily basis. Just give them perfect examples. You can be wherever you want to be if you put your mind to it, and never give up. Don't be a product of your environment, or don't let your friends influence you to do things that you really don't want to do. You have to talk to your kids every day. Every single day I talk to my kids. Even go to the school and talk to the administrators and teachers about problems that go on with the kids. I try to be just truly involved in every aspect of my kids' lives. Right now I have my boys here right now just to be a part of this.
Right. Yeah. How do you keep them from, and this may be a question for everyone at the table, how do you manage so many of the outside influences that can either be negative and or positive, but particularly the negative ones? How do you manage that as a parent? How do you deal with keeping your children grounded in spite of everything that's going on in the world today?
Well, what I do, role play. I give them scenarios. I say, hey, if somebody offer you some drugs, what are you going to say? What are you going to do? My daughters, if a guy offer you in some unethical behavior, what are you going to do? I just role model. I ask them off the wall questions. It's just to give them different options. What are you going to do? How are you going to separate yourself from that type of behavior?
And that's a good example, because I do the same thing. I try to simulate different scenarios, whether it be at school or at home. But, it kind of piggybacks off what we said about mentoring, and the mentoring starts at home. As fathers, we taught that we're supposed to just be tough. Yeah. But you find your first lessons in love at home, and it doesn't always have to start with the mother. And love is always start with a listening ear, and you find out what's going on, because the lessons, it's a pushing and a pulling. It's the pushing of discipline and respect and things like that, but it's the pulling to finding out what's going on when you're texting, what's going on at school, what's going on when you go outside to play, or what's going on, within the classroom, because, visibility is not just the structured programs like the mentoring, or when they go out to Girl Scouts and things like that. These are most of the things that's going to be inappropriate or not structured is going to happen via text message. You want to know, hey, if somebody sends you a picture that's inappropriate, don't just delete it. Have courage to stand up and say, don't send me anything like that. It starts with that confidence like you talked about. Have the confidence to say, I don't need this in my life, it's inappropriate, but you teaching them logic and saying why it's not important. Why is it important to not watch certain programs, or dress a certain way, or use a good language, or use good posture, or have an etiquette? It's not just, our role to be tough and be disciplinarians. It's loving them with a listening ear. and being involved.
Right, and I think our modern society, is the word I often use, requires our children to have a level of intelligence that often precedes their age. Here in Georgia, we are known for many things, but one of the things that's most troubling to me being in media is the sex trade and how prevalent this is. And this is an issue that is extremely powerful, and it reaches across all races and socioeconomic levels. We have children that are literally vanishing off the street, both girls and young boys, at an alarming rate. Initially, I thought this was more of a girl problem, but they look for children that are vulnerable, where there is an absence. And without these types of conversations by either a parent, whether it be a male or female, or someone who cares, our children are at risk in many ways.
I was going to say, you're nailing it, but when sometimes it's about root causes as well. Mm-hmm. When I hear Mr. Britt talk about, and Mr. Merrill, and I'm sure all of us who are parents talk about talking to your children every day, children want to be listened to. And if it's not you, they'll find somebody else. And very often, that's where the first level of vulnerability comes from, because I want to talk to somebody about and I have 3 daughters, very often they didn't want to talk to me. But I sat down and sat there as if I was prepared to listen anyway. Mm-hmm. And what it creates is an environment of trust over time. Because what I have learned is, and this is not just a dad thing, it's a parent thing, kids don't care about making you mad. In fact, I think they kind of design ways to make you mad. What they do care about, however, is disappointing you. And when you have a relationship with your children, we can talk to them and role play, but what all of us want them to do when they're in that moment, when we're not there, is to wonder, what would my dad think about this? Because that 1 extra beat or 2 extra beats that they think about may be what determines whether they tell you they're going out to spend the night at their friend's house and they're going someplace else or not, just because of those conversations. So it is about relationship building, really. And it's a dad thing, but it's a parent thing. Really, everything we're talking about is a parent thing, and we should be as engaged in it as mothers should be.
It is, and believe it or not, we are out of time. It's over. And to sort of wrap it up for everyone sitting here at the table, the presence of a male within the life of a child, and especially during adolescence and youth development, is perhaps one of the most important factors of all. I encourage people who may be watching today, who may be missing the presence of a male, to find that child a mentor, because it matters. It truly matters. And thank you all so much for having a presence here, and thank you to all the fathers who are single parents, who are a part of blended families. Thank you. Okay?